The hidden camera was tucked inside Maria's bra when Mrs. Henderson collapsed at breakfast, her coffee cup shattering on the marble floor. For 18 months, Maria had been waiting for this moment, any crack in the perfect prison that was a Scottsdale mansion. As the other servants rushed to help their elderly captor, Maria slipped into the study where the house phone sat like a golden key. Her hands shook as she dialed 911, not for medical help but for her own rescue. "Please come quickly," she whispered in accented English. "There are 6 of us held here. We haven't left this house in over a year. I have video proof." The journey to this moment had begun in Bogota, where 24-year-old Maria worked at a small hotel near the airport. She spoke decent English, had hospitality training, and dreamed of earning real wages instead of the pittance that barely fed her younger siblings. When the recruiter appeared at the hotel bar, everything about her screamed success: designer clothes, perfect English, stories of placing Colombian women in high-paying positions across America. The woman, who called herself Sandra, said she represented Elite Hospitality Staffing, a company that specialized in placing bilingual workers in luxury hotels. She showed Maria glossy brochures of 5-star properties in Phoenix and Scottsdale, testimonials from women who'd gone from poverty to prosperity. The salary was incredible, $3,000 per month, plus accommodation and tips. More than Maria could earn in 5 years in Bogota. The process seemed legitimate. There were applications to fill, Skype interviews with supposed hotel managers, even English proficiency tests. Sandra explained that the hotel preferred to hire through agencies because it simplified visa procedures. For a placement fee of $2,000, which could be deducted from future wages, Elite Hospitality would handle everything: visa, travel, job placement, even initial accommodation. Maria's family mortgaged her small apartment to raise the fee. Her mother cried at the airport, torn between pride and fear. Her teenage siblings promised to study hard with the money she'd send home. Maria boarded the plane to Mexico City, feeling like her real life was finally beginning. She'd work hard, save money, maybe even study hotel management in America. In 5 years, she could bring her whole family over. In Mexico City, Sandra met her at a safe house with 3 other Colombian women, all recruited for the same program. There was Lucia, a former restaurant manager from Medellin; Carmen, who'd worked in hotels in Cartagena; and Ana, barely 20, whose English was perfect from watching American movies. They spent a week in the house, supposedly waiting for their visa paperwork to be finalized. The crossing itself was surprisingly easy. They traveled in a comfortable van with air conditioning and tinted windows. The driver had documents that satisfied the border guards. They were domestic workers with valid visas, heading to prearranged employment. Maria felt a surge of gratitude towards Sandra and Elite Hospitality. Everything was happening exactly as promised. But the van didn't head to any hotel. Instead, it wound through increasingly exclusive neighborhoods until they reached a gated community in Scottsdale. The house that appeared before them was stunning, a sprawling hacienda-style mansion with perfect landscaping and a 6-car garage. This wasn't a hotel, Sandra explained smoothly. This was better. Private hospitality for a wealthy elderly couple who entertained frequently. Same work, better conditions, higher pay. The warning signs came quickly but were dismissed just as fast. Their passports were collected for safekeeping in the household safe. Their phones were taken because the Hendersons value privacy. They were given uniforms and shown to small rooms in the servants' wing. When Maria asked about contacting her family, Sandra, who turned out to be the house manager, not a recruiter, said they could use the house phone on Sundays, supervised. By the time Maria understood the trap, it was already closed. The Hendersons, a couple in their 70s who'd made their fortune in real estate, ran their home like a plantation. 6 women worked around the clock, cooking, cleaning, gardening, serving at elaborate dinner parties. They were never allowed to leave the property. Security cameras watched every room except the bathrooms. The 10-foot walls around the estate weren't just for privacy. The pay they'd been promised never materialized. Sandra explained there were deductions for room and board, for the visa arrangements, for the placement fee, for uniform cleaning, for breakages. After all deductions, they might receive $50 a month, sometimes nothing. When Anna protested, Sandra reminded her that she was in the country illegally, that one phone call would have her deported to Colombia, where certain people were very interested in her whereabouts. The threat was clear and effective. Each woman had been carefully chosen not just for their skills, but for their vulnerability. Lucia had testified against a cartel member. Carmen's ex-husband had connections to paramilitaries. Anna's family had received death threats over land disputes. Deportation didn't just mean failure. It meant danger. The Hendersons and Sandra knew exactly what leverage they held. The work was exhausting. 16-hour days were standard. Mrs. Henderson was particular about everything. Towels folded in exact thirds, meals served at precise temperatures, silver polished until it could be used as mirrors. Mr. Henderson hosted business dinners where the women served in silence, invisible except when refilling glasses or clearing plates. Important men discussed million-dollar deals while women, who couldn't afford phone calls home, served them salmon and champagne. But it was the isolation that broke spirits. No internet, no cell phones, no unsupervised contact with the outside world. The weekly phone calls home were scripted performances with Sandra listening. Tell your family you're happy, working hard, saving money. Any deviation meant losing phone privileges. Maria learned to cry silently after hanging up, hearing her mother's joy at her success while standing in a marble prison. The other women in the house had similar stories. Elena from Guatemala had been there 3 years, lured by promises of restaurant work. Fatima from Morocco had thought she was becoming a nanny. Isabel from Honduras had answered an ad for hotel housekeeping. All had paid thousands to be delivered into bondage. All were trapped by the same combination of stolen documents, threats, and the impossibility of escape. They developed a whispered solidarity, sharing extra food when someone was punished with reduced meals, covering for each other during the rare moments of rest, teaching each other words in different languages. But they also watched each other for signs of breaking. Previous escape attempts had failed because someone always cracked under pressure, revealed the plan in exchange for small privileges. Maria's first escape attempt came after 6 months. During a garden party, while the Hendersons entertained dozens of guests, she approached a woman who seemed kind, whispered that they needed help. The woman's face had shifted from concern to discomfort to fear. She walked away quickly, and within an hour Sandra was dragging Maria to the punishment room, a windowless space in the basement where troublemakers spent days in darkness. 3 days in that room taught Maria that open rebellion wouldn't work. The Hendersons had chosen their victims well, selected their location perfectly. Scottsdale's wealthy residents didn't want to see the exploitation that maintained their lifestyles. The police, when they occasionally came for noise complaints, were charmed by Mrs. Henderson and never asked to speak to the staff. The system protected itself. So Maria changed tactics. She became the perfect servant, earning trust through obedience. She learned the house routines, memorized the security camera blind spots, observed when the Hendersons were most vulnerable. She volunteered for the worst jobs, worked without complaint, even smiled at Sandra's cruelest comments, let them think she was broken. Meanwhile, she was planning. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mr. Henderson's nephew visited for a week, a tech entrepreneur who left his devices everywhere. While cleaning his room, Maria found an old smartphone he'd apparently forgotten. Her heart pounding, she hid it inside her pillowcase. That night, she discovered it still worked, still had battery, could still record video. For the next 3 months, Maria documented everything. The locked doors, the confiscated passports, the security cameras. She recorded Sandra's threats, Mrs. Henderson's casual cruelty, the exhausted faces of women who hadn't seen the outside world in years. She had the phone in places only someone doing deep cleaning would find. Inside old purse linings, behind loose bathroom tiles, wrapped in plastic in the garden shed. The evidence accumulated like a slow-building criminal case. Work schedules that violated every labor law. Pay stubs showing massive illegal deductions. The punishment room with its lock on the outside. Most damning were the conversations she managed to record. Sandra explaining to a new arrival how deportation threats kept everyone in line. Mrs. Henderson complaining about how hard it was to find grateful help these days. But evidence meant nothing without a way to deliver it. The phone had no service, couldn't make calls or send messages. Maria needed an opportunity, a moment when the system's vigilance faltered. She waited with the patience of someone who'd learned that desperation led to punishment rooms. The chance would come. It had to. It came on a Thursday morning when Mrs. Henderson's coffee cup hit the floor. The elderly woman's face went pale, her breathing labored. A mild heart episode, the paramedics would later determine, brought on by age and a lifetime of rich foods. But in that moment of chaos, with Sandra calling 911 and the other women gathering anxiously, Maria saw her window. The study door was usually locked, but Sandra had rushed through it to get Mrs. Henderson's medication. Maria slipped inside, her body blocking the security camera's view as she'd practiced. The phone, the real phone, not the smartphone, sat on Mr. Henderson's desk. She dialed 911, knowing she had maybe minutes before Sandra returned. The dispatcher initially assumed she was calling about the medical emergency. Maria had to speak quickly, clearly, forcing authority into her voice despite her terror. 6 women held against their will. Address confirmed. Evidence available. Please send police, not just paramedics. The sound of footsteps in the hall made her hang up and slip back out, rejoining the crowd around Mrs. Henderson as if she'd never left. The police arrived 40 minutes later, long after the paramedics had stabilized Mrs. Henderson and left. 2 officers, routine follow-up, Sandra assured them, but Maria had positioned herself strategically, making eye contact, letting her desperation show. One officer, a young woman with observant eyes, noticed. She asked to speak to the staff, just routine questions about the medical emergency. That was all Maria needed. In the kitchen, away from Sandra's immediate supervision, she pulled out the hidden smartphone. "Please," she whispered, showing the officer video of the punishment room. "There's more. So much more. We're prisoners here." The officer's expression shifted from skepticism to alarm as she watched footage of Sandra explaining how deportation threats kept everyone compliant. What followed happened quickly. More police arrived. Then immigration officials, Labor Department investigators, FBI agents specializing in human trafficking. The mansion transformed from prison to crime scene. The Hendersons, suddenly frail and confused, were arrested in their silk pajamas. Sandra tried to flee but was caught at the airport with a bag full of cash and false documents. The women were taken to a victim services center, where the full scope of their exploitation was documented. Passports were recovered from the Henderson safe, along with records showing years of systematic labor trafficking. Bank records revealed the millions saved by paying virtually nothing for round-the-clock service. The placement fees charged to desperate women funded Sandra's comfortable lifestyle and the Hendersons' political donations. Maria's phone proved invaluable. Her 3 months of secret recording provided evidence that written testimony alone couldn't capture. The casual dehumanization, the calculated cruelty, the business of bondage disguised as domestic service. Prosecutors built their case on her digital foundation, turning hidden footage into federal charges. The legal process was complex. Some women faced deportation despite being victims. Others, like Maria, qualified for special visas granted to trafficking survivors who cooperated with prosecution. The distinction seemed arbitrary. All had suffered equally, but the law recognized some suffering more than others. Maria testified for days, reliving each humiliation while the Hendersons' expensive lawyers tried to paint her as a disgruntled employee. The trial revealed the operation's scope. The Hendersons had cycled through dozens of women over 15 years. Elite hospitality staffing was a front that operated across multiple states. Sandra had recruited from Colombia, Guatemala, Honduras, the Philippines, anywhere women were desperate enough to believe luxury hotel dreams. The placement fees alone had generated hundreds of thousands in profit. Mr. Henderson died before sentencing, his heart giving out during the trial. Mrs. Henderson received 10 years, looking confused as a judge explained her crimes. She genuinely seemed to believe she'd been a good employer, providing food and shelter to women who should have been grateful. Sandra got 25 years and would face additional charges in other states. For Maria, freedom felt strange after 18 months of captivity. The Victim Services Organization helped her find legitimate work, but she flinched whenever employers asked for her documents. She sent money home but couldn't explain to her family why she cried during their video calls. The luxury hotel job had delivered her to America as promised, just not in any way she'd imagined. She kept the smartphone that had saved them all. Sometimes she looked through the videos, evidence of a nightmare that seemed impossible in retrospect. How had educated women been enslaved in one of America's wealthiest neighborhoods? How had dinner party guests ignored the exhausted faces serving them? How had the system failed so completely that only a hidden camera and a heart attack had set them free? Maria works now as an advocate, helping identify and rescue domestic workers trapped in similar situations. She knows the signs, the women who never leave the houses they clean, who look away when asked direct questions, who flinch when their employers speak. The massage parlors staffed by women who sleep in back rooms. The restaurants where workers never seem to go home. Modern slavery hidden in plain sight. She testified before Congress about labor trafficking, showing legislators the same videos she'd shown that police officer. Some seemed shocked that such exploitation could happen in America. Others looked uncomfortable, perhaps thinking of their own domestic help, wondering about the women who cleaned their offices after hours. Change came slowly, in incremental policy adjustments that felt inadequate against the scope of the problem. The Scottsdale mansion was sold, the proceeds going to victim restitution. Maria received $60,000, a fortune by Colombian standards, but small compensation for 18 months of slavery. She sent most home, keeping just enough to survive while building her new life. Her family still didn't fully understand what had happened. How could they? Their daughter had gone to work in American hotels and come back talking about hidden cameras and punishment rooms. Years later, Maria still dreams about the marble floor she scrubbed until her knees bled. She wakes at dawn from body memory, ready to start 16-hour shifts that no longer exist. Certain sounds, coffee cups breaking, garage doors opening, trigger panic attacks. The freedom to walk outside whenever she wants still feels like a miracle. She thinks often about the women still trapped in similar houses. The recruitment continues under different names. Desperate people still mortgage futures for promised opportunities. Wealthy households still hunger for cheap, controllable labor. The system that created her enslavement adapts but endures. Her testimony saved 6 women, but thousands remain invisible, serving dinners and scrubbing floors and sleeping in rooms they cannot leave. The luxury hotel job had been a lie wrapped in enough truth to be believed. The hospitality industry existed. Colombian women did work in it. Some even prospered. But Maria had been selected for a different kind of service, one that required imprisonment rather than employment. She crossed borders seeking wages and found slavery instead, escaped through patience and technology and an old woman's failing heart. Her story ends not with justice but with survival. The Hendersons were replaced by other wealthy couples seeking bargain labor. Sandra's network spawned imitators. The demand for domestic slaves ensured supply would follow. Maria had broken free from one house, but the system that built such houses remained intact. She'd hidden a camera and captured truth, but truth alone couldn't free the thousands still cleaning silver they'd never own in houses they'd never leave. The smartphone sits in her drawer now, its memory full of evidence that changed lives but not structures. Maria builds her American life on the foundation of that documentation, working legally, paying taxes, saving money. But part of her remains in the Scottsdale mansion, polishing silver for guests who never saw her, recording secrets on a forgotten phone, waiting for the perfect moment to prove that luxury came at the cost of liberty, and that sometimes the only difference between hotel job and house slavery was the honesty of the recruiter who sold you the dream.